title of this video is Academic Writing. Einstein once said that ego is inversely proportional to knowledge. The more you know, the lesser your ego. The lesser the knowledge, the more your ego. That's essentially saying that arrogant people have less knowledge. But academic writing is all about contributing to knowledge. To contribute to knowledge, you've got to be able to find the gaps. You've got to be able to relate your contribution to the other work that's out there. Let's break down how you actually do that. So the mission of academic writing is to establish a research territory. You need to talk about the landscape in conceptual terms, establish a place for your work, and then go ahead and occupy it. So you've got to introduce your topic. You've got to explain why it's relevant and interesting. You've got to refer to previous research in the area. You cannot simply introduce a topic without referring to other work, because it will not be accepted. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything builds on something else. You've then got to establish the niche. You've got to point out where the research gap is. What's the hole? Why is there actually room for your work in the intellectual landscape? Then you've got to occupy that niche. You've got to explain what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to evaluate it, and you've got to point out the structure of your writing. So people who are interested in particular components can drill straight into those components. Do not leave people hanging around. Point them in the direction so they can choose where they want to go. So how do we get into it? Well, we've got the introduction. That's our entry point. Again, it's a funnel. And we've talked a little bit about how that funnel works. And there's some fundamental questions in that funnel. As we've talked about in the frame, what is the problem to be solved? What did you decide to do and why? And what question was asked, right? It's exactly the same kind of framing as an abstract, but this is what you're also seeing in the first paragraph of an introduction. It's got rules as well. Formal definition. What are you talking about? Set the scene. What's the history? What potential is there? It's very specific to what the genre looks like, as to what this paragraph looks like, but it is the tip of the iceberg. It needs to show a little bit, but make the reader want more. Here's some examples of hooks of theses in example papers. There's some around turbulence, there's some around flow, waves, wave equations. It tells you that these things have been of interest to years, and sometimes it tells you why. Now, obviously these are quite technical hooks written for a very specific audience, but clearly they were interesting enough for these papers to be published. They're clearly more technical than what we were looking at before. Let's have a look now at some openings. The green sentence, which your eyes immediately leapt to, are likewise. That's got to indicate that this text follows something else. You need to identify those linkage sentences almost instantly to see how one thing follows another. How do we fix this? Well, you can see there's a number of X's in there, and you can instantly see that this is about buildings, and we've talked previously about Rebecca Volk's paper, and indeed this is the first paragraph from that paper. So you'll note that it's very heavy on the X's. I've taken the references out. It's heavy on the X's because it's a literature review paper, and you're going to expect loads of references everywhere. This paper's all about explaining a field and explaining the state of the art, future directions, challenges, opportunities. What order should it be in? The last paragraph talks about construction rates, industrialized countries' construction rates. It gives you a sense of what the question's going to be. The question is, how is the construction sector operating in industrialized countries? That's what immediately leaps to mind when you read that last paragraph. It gives you that indicator. It always gives you that information. Look for that question. It'll give you the title of the paper most of the time. Okay, here's another paragraph. Now, you should be looking for time things straight away. So your eyes should pop to 10 years ago. Should that be first? Perhaps. Again, because your eyes should be looking for those link sentences, these examples, in the same way, linking those concepts together. Let's rearrange this. Let's look at this last sentence first of all. These examples of silicon micromechanics are not laboratory curiosities. Most are well-established commercial developments conceived within about the last 10 years. So it's trying to argue that silicon micromechanics are more than laboratory curiosities. Maybe a lot of people think they are. So the question that answers is silicon being commercialized as a micromechanical material? This paper had almost 2,000 citations to it, so clearly it was a very valuable paper. Let's just break it down a little bit. So it starts off by talking about silicon in the same way. It refers to something else. In the same way that silicon's also done this, silicon also do that. It's being used by a number of firms. It's been used by some for over 10 years. So it's talking about time, it's talking about breadth, it's talking about some specific devices to raise the credibility. It then goes into some detail. It gives you some topics that it's going to be talking about in the future. It signposts what's about to come, but then it goes directly into the thesis. Silicon micromechanics are a big deal. Clearly people think they are, if almost 2,000 people have cited it. People have agreed. Okay, let's have a look at this. The time again should pop out. Decades, few decades. As a result, and beside this, these are links. You already have a sense of where results section should be based on our previous work on abstracts. So have a quick look at this and then think about how you might want to rearrange it. It rearranges to this. It's been more than a few decades since mobile wireless communications, over the last couple of decades. So the time is clustered together. Then it talks about introduction, so it talks about where things started. Besides this, as a result, second last, as you might have predicted, and then the last. These new applications are satisfying user requirements and also opening up new business horizons. So the question could be, how have wireless applications evolved? Or it could be, wireless applications are big business. This particular paper had 900 citations back in 2020.